Well, hi everyone, and welcome back to the Engage podcast. And I just want to start by saying a massive thank you to anyone in the story and the history of this illustrious podcast, because we've been going over a year now.
Yeah.
I don't know how many episodes we've done. Are we like near 100, like a big milestone?
I think we're probably around 30.
Okay, it's quite far off 100 then. Anyway, I just wanted to say to everyone who has come up to us in different settings, young and old, it's been so encouraging to hear your feedback, and just thank you so much for whether you've messaged or whether you've told us personally. We're genuinely grateful, and it's that kind of feedback that frankly keeps us coming back for more. That and the sheer love of politics, Christianity, and being on camera.
Speak for yourself on that one, James, I think.
Anyway, how are you, Peter? Tell me how you are.
I'm doing all right,
You're
thank
back to being dressed in a more Peter-esque fashion.
Indeed.
I got in a lot of trouble. Did you see the comment, I think from a friend of yours?
Absolutely.
About how outrageous it was that I can't remember what I called you.
I can remember what you called me.
I bet you can. Yeah, I called you a slob, didn't I?
You did.
And it was for comedic effect mainly.
Yeah.
And I
Do you wish to give me an apology now?
Yeah, I stand by it. You're resplendent in shorts as well. So are you a shorts wearing guy in general, or are you more? It has to be a certain temperature on your phone before
So
you break out the shorts.
It's almost an act of personal stubbornness.
Okay.
Against the oncoming winter.
Yeah.
In that, once it has been summer, I want it to still be summer, regardless of whether it's not actually that warm.
No, fair enough. Now, I should just explain to everyone that you might pick up some background noise on this podcast. We're really sorry about that. But do you know what? We have managed to find a slither of silence in the wider building, because we're doing this in the kitchen in Care's office. And one of the reasons why we launched a major Romney Street renovation project was precisely because we would quite like to create a more professional filming space where we can podcast to our heart's content without taking up one of the kitchens in our office. And the background noise you can hear are just some of the contractors and so on, still just bustling around, finishing their day's work. So please forgive us for that. That may impact some future podcasts, but we will do our very best to minimize it, won't we?
Absolutely.
That was a very good notice, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Did you enjoy that? Thank you. No, thank you very much. Anyway, can I just plug something though, that because I'm going to plug this now and then I'm going to plug it again at the end.
Okay, go for it. A double plug.
I just want to, producer Isaac, now that we're involving you more, which camera, this one. Okay, I just want to hold this up here. So, dear MP, ... your guide to engaging with your local representative. This is hot off the press. We have only just published this. And this is a comprehensive guide to how to effectively engage with your MP. And all I'm going to do is just turn to the contents page and give you a little flavor of what you can expect. MPs, your questions answered. How to think about your MP as a Christian. I believe you wrote that, Peter. MPs are human too. We have an interview with Tim Farron, no less. We also have a case study in how MPs make up their minds. We've got tips from the office of a former MP. Fantastic. We've got advice on forging a relationship with your MP as a church. And then we got things like 7 ways to pray for your MP and how we at Care specifically work with MPs. So this is beautifully produced. Peter, you had a big hand. You were the editor of this project. You saw it through from start to finish. So congratulations to you. Thank you for your hard work on this. Congratulations to our designer, Joel. And I just encourage you, you can access this on the Care website, but also if you would like your own personal copy, if you'd like a personal signed copy, then
those are not available.
Then those are not available. Yes, you're absolutely right. But you can get a copy. Just get in contact with us. We happily send this to you free of charge.
Yeah.
As many copies as you want. And I just think this is going to be a fantastic resource for Christians, I hope, up and down the country. So all power to you. Fantastic.
So we're going to start off, I think, with the big news from the last week or so.
Yes.
Which is the story around Angela Rayner and her tax affairs, which eventually culminated in her resigning from government. James, why don't you just set the scene for us for a moment? What has happened here for anyone who's missed it?
Okay, so the big message is that the former Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner, who also held the local communities and housing brief, which was a very significant part of the government's reform agenda, which is they wanted to build 1.5 million new homes, and my goodness, we need them. But she also was the key figure behind the new employment rights bill, which was going to hugely enhance workers' rights across the country. Things like you have a right to request flexible working from day one, the rights to maternity leave and paternity leave from day one, rather than having to wait 6 months, and so on. But she underpaid nearly 40,000 in stamp duty on a property purchase. And basically, it turns out that some of the original legal advice that she did receive was wrong, but also that she did not work hard enough to get the correct financial advice. And if she had done so, that would have very quickly told her, no, you do need to pay stamp duty on this other property. It's quite a complicated arrangement that she's in. And I think it probably is worth just, before we get on to the wrongs I think we can see here, I did really feel for her because she's a mum, she has a son who has quite serious disabilities, who's very, very fortunate to be alive. And the house that he lives in has been specifically designed for his care. And it's very easy whenever anything like this happens, when the media scent blood and they chase after a potential political scalp, it's very easy to forget there are human beings behind this. And you could see how visibly upset she was when she gave an interview to Beth Rigby. So on a personal level, I guess just as a human being, as a Christian as well, I hope that I can start by saying I actually felt very, very sorry for her. And I hope that she and indeed her family are okay, particularly her kids.
Yeah, no, completely. I agree with all of that. I think, from what I can tell of the circumstances around it, it was not a case where things were really simple to work out. So I don't think there's currently a suggestion that she has deliberately done something wrong.
Yes.
I think essentially it was concluded by the ethics advisor that she couldn't be considered to meet the highest possible standards of proper conduct.
Yeah.
But he also mentioned in it that in his statement, I think, that there were no questions around her personal integrity. And so it's not a deliberate
and she
mistake.
Did self-refer herself as well. It's not like Keir Starmer had to refer her.
Yeah.
And I think that does... you could cynically say that was a last-ditch attempt by her to try to do the right thing in the hope that would, stand in her favour. I prefer to take a more charitable interpretation, which is that she did the right thing.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that you're absolutely right. So just again, a little bit more detail. Rayner had claimed initially that she believed she had acted properly by transferring her share of the family property into a trust for her disabled son. And on that basis, she said that she understood herself to be liable only for the standard rate of tax. And she claimed to have legal advice, which in her account reinforced that position.
Yeah.
The conveyancing firm involved have strongly disputed that. And they'd insist they gave no tax or trust advice and merely applied HMRC's own calculator. And then in light then of fresh legal advice that she commissioned and she received, and really the point being that because she was a trustee of said trust, that therefore she was actually liable for the higher amount of stamp duty to be paid. And that's where the kind of crux of it is.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, just to add to it, was I think she was advised she should get specialist tax advice, and she didn't do it.
Right.
And that's where the error came in, because if that had come in, then she might have been alerted to this earlier.
And look, I mean, I think a story like this, we've talked a little bit about the human angle on this. I think the other angle is it's tragic because it reinforces a narrative that's so firmly embedded anyway. Public trust in politicians is at an all-time low and has been getting lower and lower. And when this kind of thing happens, it just contributes to a furthering of that narrative. And I think the great danger for Christians who perhaps have a tendency towards cynicism at times about politics is we buy into the narrative and it sort of reinforces this idea of, politics is not good, politics is mucky. And I think something at CARE that we're always saying is Yeah, you bet politics is mucky. Like, what do you expect? Everything's mucky. Every business, every part of the arts, every part of education, the whole world is impacted by sin, tainted by sin, ruined in some way by sin. So, we need to just guard against allowing stories like this, as damaging and as upsetting as they are, to push us to a point where we just sort of go the very opposite of this. Go, I'm not even going to bother engaging. I'll wash my hands of them all. That's a kind of, I'm stereotyping, but that is something I just want to be careful about. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And I think that's actually one of the reasons why it was absolutely right for her to resign.
Yes, that's a good point.
It is because politicians being honest is kind of a pretty key principle, or else how can we trust them to govern the nation?
Yes.
Like you can't have politicians where you sort of think actually they're all just in it for themselves.
Yes.
So yeah, I think it was right for her to resign as a matter of public trust. Just to kind of pick up on something which you were saying there, it's really difficult, I think, and this goes for multiple parts of life, but when we already have a preconceived narrative in our heads about something, it's very, very difficult not to read news stories in light of that pre-existing narrative.
Yeah.
And effectively to tar everyone with the same brush, when actually, as we've just talked about, in this case, the conclusion was that there was not deliberate wrongdoing. And yet there have been other politicians for whom I think I would probably quite happily say there was deliberate wrongdoing.
Yeah.
So I don't think, for instance, you could say you put this case in the same bracket as, I'm going to use one particular example, of Boris Johnson. And I'm saying this as someone who leans to right politically and who generally votes Conservative.
Weird, because you're a massive fan of Boris, I've been told.
So to give you a contrast with the Angela Rayner case.
Yeah.
So a couple of years ago, Boris Johnson was found to have misled the House of Commons deliberately. He was found to have deliberately misled MPs on the Privileges Committee when they investigated him. He was found to have been complicit in a campaign of abuse against fellow MPs, and he was doing all of the above while he was Prime Minister. And that's before you even get on to things like questions around what was happening during lockdown and Partygate and things like that. So it's very easy to read things under one narrative.
Yeah.
But cases are not always the same.
No,
and sometimes there are deliberate mistakes, sometimes there are accidental ones. And there's a difference, isn't there, between using legal loopholes, which are legal and legitimate, and doing something which is actually illegal.
Yes.
And in this case, Angela Rayner would have done something which was illegal by not paying $40,000.
Yes.
And I think it's probably also worth saying, because we haven't talked about it yet, within the context of this conversation, the biblical principle, again, is we effectively pay governments the honour they deserve, and that includes paying our taxes.
Yes.
So that's a firm Christian principle.
That's right. I mean, that's Romans 13:7, and that's the great example Paul gives is pay your taxes. But also, I mean, I was struck just rereading. So if you want to read a piece from a Christian perspective on this, then our chief executive, Ross Hendry, wrote about this in our Friday long reads. And you can find that on the CARE website, care.org.uk. He quotes Proverbs 11:1, which gives us the principle, a false balance is an abomination to the Lord, but a just weight is his delight. So in the context then of financial dealings, this reminds us that honesty and fairness in money matters are not just technicalities, but moral imperatives.
Yeah.
I thought that was well put, because it can be easy to kind of weigh up money and those kind of things on a purely pragmatic basis, whereas the Bible warns the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. I know we've talked before about how abused that verse can be, but actually when used properly, it's such a powerful warning. You think about the warnings against greed, for example. Think about 1 John 1:7, that we're to walk in the light, we're to live openly and honestly. And that was something I was struck by, was why put yourself in a position where there's even doubt about your financial arrangements. In one sense, I feel like she did take a bit of a risk, and she's been found out.
I think that is the thing with those in public office. There's the classic line, which I assume this is a historical line rather than a Shakespeare line. I think it is a history line. The phrase "Caesar's wife must be above suspicion."
Yes. Yes.
Where he sort of divorced his wife not because she'd done anything wrong, but because she was suspected of having done something wrong, or people were claiming she'd done something wrong.
Yes.
And you sort of need that kind of attitude, actually, I think, in politics, where you need to be above suspicion.
Yeah, and she was the housing secretary.
Well, I think that is the irony around it all, isn't it?
There, absolutely. And now, look, imagine that she was just deputy prime minister. She didn't hold the local communities and housing brief. I would have imagined, because of the words of the ethics advisor, that there was no way she could stay in government. But it adds this whole extra level of hypocrisy. And I wonder if it's worth just commenting on that, because the charge of hypocrisy levelled at her is in part because she was housing secretary, but also because when, under the previous government, ministers like Nadhim Zawahiwi were caught up in tax dodging, and I can't actually remember exactly what it was that he was alleged to have done, but she was very quick to be out on the airwaves, saying this is wrong and we should demand the highest possible standard of our public servants. And of course, Keir Starmer became prime minister with a great promise outside Downing Street to clean up politics and so on and so forth. And I think that is something that the wider public, we all, I think, even as Christians, we all have a slight Pharisaical, legalistic kind of impulse within us that is quick to see the sin in others, less quick to see it in ourselves. But at the same time, we are allowed under Christ to make judgments about other people's behaviour. It's not always wrong. And I think, yes, the charge of hypocrisy is definitely, to varying degrees, applicable here.
Yeah, and I think exacerbated too by the fact that she is part of a government which is raising taxes. She's normally seen as being one of the strongest voices in favour of doing that as well.
Yes.
So no, I think that completely explains some of the public frustration around it. Just rounding off this story.
Yes.
I guess this then precipitated a raft of changes in a reshuffle from Keir Starmer.
Yeah.
Shall we just talk about what some of the headline changes are?
Yeah.
So it's worth saying, in terms of Angela Rayner's position, so she's resigned from being deputy leader of the Labour Party and deputy PM and the housing minister. In terms of the deputy leader of Labour, that is an elected post within the Labour Party, so the members will vote on that, whereas deputy PM, that is a position which is appointed by Keir Starmer. So Keir Starmer has appointed David Lammy as deputy PM. He has also given him the justice brief. Before that, David Lammy was foreign secretary.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I sort of felt like that was a bit of a downgrade personally.
Oh, the giving of the deputy prime minister was clearly just to kind of pacify it.
Exactly.
Because you're totally right. I mean, there are three great offices of state. There's the Chancellor. She hasn't changed. Still Rachel Reeves. There's the Foreign Office. Well, now the previous Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, is now the Foreign Secretary.
Yeah.
And then there's the Home Office. And Shabana Mahmood, beg your pardon. Shabana Mahmood, from Justice to Home Secretary, that is a promotion, and it's done so because she's been seen as a very effective operator.
Yeah.
And the other winner of this reshuffle is, I suspect, Robert Jenrick will be rubbing his hands in glee, because I think he'll enjoy going up against David Lammy in the Justice brief far more than he did against Shabana Mahmood. And so I think you're absolutely right. For Lammy, it is a bit of a demotion. And I think that's interesting because I generally, from what I'd read and what I picked up, I don't think that figures within the Labour government, even close to Starmer, thought he was doing a bad job.
Yeah.
I think this is a pragmatic move by Starmer in that he can't really afford to lose Yvette Cooper. She has previous government experience, which is lacking across the front bench in general. Yeah. And also, I think that, it's so funny when these reshuffles happen because, the Prime Minister tried to claim this was all part of phase 2. So he did this video because he reshuffled his economic team in number 10 and some other advisors, appointed Darren Jones, former Chief Secretary to the Treasury, as the new sort of, principal secretary or chief of staff or whatever the title was he gave him in number 10 to drive things through. That was the language that was used. And then there's all this cabinet meeting today, 9:30, first cabinet. This is now a team that will bring success. And you're kind of like, well, what are you saying about the previous team? You're saying that for the last 12 months you had a team that couldn't bring you success.
And I actually think, picking up on that point, that is the really interesting angle on all of this. It is effectively a government who have only been in office for a year and who have an enormous majority should never normally be having to make a reshuffle, which is so big, where you're replacing two of the great four officers of state within a year, and yet that is where we are. And effectively, it is an admission that whatever Labour is doing, it is not working.
I will say this, though. I will say that I think already you can see some signs that Number 10's media game and ground game is gone up a notch. And I think that the speed with which Starmer moved from Angela Rayner resigning to reshuffle did have the effect of knocking the Rayner story way down the list. Suddenly, that story became quite old news, and the reshuffle dominated the headlines. And they were planning to do this later. They brought it forward very deliberately, not just because she resigned. That was part of the reason, but also because they wanted to flip the story into a refreshed new team. And interestingly, a poll came out, I think in the last couple of days, that showed Reform's lead for the first time dropping 2 points, Labour gaining 2 points, and the Tories, as ever, stuck in about 17-18%, whatever it was. Now, you can't read too much from any polls at the moment, but that is just interesting. And time will tell whether this rejig Downing Street can continue to be more effective, because one of the big criticisms of the government is its lack of communicative ability. If that changes, at the very least, you would have more competition in the public square, and Reform will face a much bigger challenge. And I mean, we'll have to come on to talk about them as well, as we nearly always do, because even if just briefly, did you watch any of their conference? I know you're a big fan. You're wearing this. You're wearing the right colour, aren't you? You're wearing the Reform. Isn't he, Isaac? He's wearing the Reform colour. Isaac, for the record, is nodding. So you like Boris Johnson. You're also clearly a Nigel Farage fan as well. No. I'm the moderate on this podcast.
Says the person who works for the Conservative Party,
Scottish Conservative and Unionist Party.
Indeed.
Sorry, carry on.
I have seen a couple of clips. I saw the clip of Andrea Jenkins coming on.
I'm an insomniac.
Exactly.
I'm an insomniac. And I am an insomniac.
It's
today.
as if she were in the room.
Yeah, exactly.
And
that's actually very insulting to me.
I saw the headline about the doctor they had on stage claiming the King's cancer was due to the COVID vaccine, which I thought was not very helpful.
No. But totally mad.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the Reform's conference was again somewhat downgraded in the news.
Yes, that's
right.
That's right.
All the stories around Labour, to be honest.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure it necessarily had quite the cut through it might have done. Was there anything which particularly struck you from it?
I think Nigel Farage's speech, the bits I saw was typical. It was energetic. It felt more like a rally than a conference. I think that it was they'd clearly borrowed some things from the sort of Trump approach in America. Well, that's not a surprise. Farage is very close to Trump, big admirer of his. I think the other thing is, I think Reform are serious about their professionalising their operation. They've set up a policy board that will reflect the views of the membership, that will work closely with Farage and the top team on making decisions. And that's made up of some really, interesting, thoughtful people, different backgrounds, different experiences. So I think time will tell where all this is going, but there's no doubt that, Reform are serious. They believe they need to win, because if they don't, Britain is lost. That's what they think. I think that's a fascinating motivation to try to get into number 10.
And I also think that they think they can win.
Yes.
Because the Conservatives currently seem to be utterly dead in the water.
Yes.
And I mean, let's face it, they have now been ahead in the polls by a comfortable margin for about the last 6 months.
Well,
so
exactly right.
So yeah, I mean, when we had the election just over a year ago, the general election, although Reform was on the rise, I don't think people expected quite so quickly things would change. I also wonder whether they've actually peaked too early.
Oh, I agree. I think this is their biggest challenge. How do they stay and keep the momentum, stay on top between now and potentially 4 years from now? Although they've been telling everyone to get ready for an election in 2027 because the market will crash, the economy will be in the dumps. And so, interestingly, of course, Reform, one of the big things they make a play on is concerns around free speech and tapping into...
Oh, what a beautiful transition
I thought you'd like this one. I thought you'd like... This was one of my better ones. And every now... Pretty regularly on this podcast, we talk about free speech. And I think it's a really fascinating topic and issue to talk about because, so let's be clear, the story that's led to this, you may well have seen it, is the Irish comedian Graham Linehan, who was also the author of Father Ted, or creator of Father Ted, a famous comedy. He was arrested at Heathrow getting off a plane by 5 armed police officers.
Yeah.
And of course, what devastating, deadly and dangerous crime did he commit? Well, he was detained on suspicion of inciting violence under public order laws, and he was questioned for several hours. He was later taken to hospital because his blood pressure rose dangerously high.
Yeah.
And this was all because of a series of tweets on the platform X. I mean,
there's a lot of pausing going on for dramatic effect here, James.
Don't quite know what on earth the Metropolitan Police were thinking at a time when public trust in the police is so low, at a time when people's burglaries, they don't even bother reporting them because they have such little confidence that the police will even investigate. The Metropolitan Police, in their infinite wisdom, decide, I know what we'll do. We'll send not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, 5 armed police officers, because Graham Linehan's tweets are clearly on a par with actual terrorists. I mean, it's just a terrible indictment of the state of policing, I think, in this country. Though I do have one caveat.
Go on.
Well, the one caveat I would say is we have way too many laws in this country.
Yeah.
And we cannot expect the police to understand and correctly apply every single one of the far too many laws in our statutes book. So I do feel a bit for them.
So let's do a little bit more setting the scene in terms of what the content of the tweets was, because that is significant for this story. So Graham Linehan is relatively outspoken in terms of being gender critical. All 3 of the tweets refer to trans activism, essentially.
Yes.
They are relatively inflammatory. So one of them talks about potentially punching people.
Yes.
Another one talks about hating trans activists and calling them misogynists and homophobes. So it is relatively inflammatory language. The counterpart to that, I think I would say, is that you will very regularly see far worse things coming from trans activists. So the sort of kill TERFs kind of message, which is out there. All the time when J.K. Rowling's own home address was leaked online. So it is not like one side in that debate is squeaky clean while Graham Linehan is saying potentially slightly nasty things. But yeah, I think the reaction from Labour politicians actually was pretty good this time in terms of they were reluctant to overtly criticise the police because you don't want to destroy trust in public institutions.
Gets destroyed anyway. So,
but something like Wes Streeting saying we need to police the streets, not tweets. It's like a kind of common sense line, which cuts through and is very sensible.
Great communicator, Wes Streeting.
I think
that's a very, very, very good line because it's easy to remember. Police streets, not tweets. And I think, to be fair to the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Sir Mark Riley, he called for urgent reform, saying the officers should not be tasked with policing toxic culture wars. And it's not like he will have made the decision to send 5 armed police officers. That would have been made lower down. I hope whoever made that decision is given a serious talking to. But I agree. And I suppose the issue here is, from a Christian perspective, there's 2 things that I want to hold in tension. One is I don't think free speech should be completely free.
Agree.
Secondly, I think that as a Christian, no believer in Jesus, and in fact no decent human being, should be putting tweets up like the ones that Graham Linehan put up. And I think this whole thing of, I'm so into free speech I can just say what I want. Well, actually, I don't want to live in a society where that is true. And I also think that from a Christian perspective, we have to accept limits on our freedoms for all manner of reasons, primarily to do with public safety. And I think sometimes some Christians, indeed, dare I say it, maybe even some organizations, tend to give the impression that the only Christian way to understand free speech is just to have it completely unlimited. And I'm not sure I agree.
Well, I almost wonder whether it is worth giving a couple of slightly more specific examples of where we wouldn't necessarily want completely unfettered free speech. So one example I think would be our laws around libel. So I don't believe that you should just be able to make unsubstantiated highly disparaging claims which defame someone.
Yes.
And there be, with no evidence, and there to be no consequences.
I agree.
And I think the second one would be around looking to incite violence as well.
Yeah. And we recognise that the latter category is harder to prove, because it can be an element of subjectivity around, well, I wasn't trying to incite violence, I was just giving an opinion. Well, actually, in this case, the police said that his tweets incited violence against trans people, and then he's saying, no, they didn't. And now, again, the police don't help themselves, do they? Because the heavy-handed way they treated him for the kind of crime that he committed, you're kind of like, come on, like, that's not the common sense thing that we've just been talking about.
Completely. And I think, again, once you put Graham Linehan's context within the context of the debate as a whole, well, then do I seriously think he's actually calling people to start assaulting people? No, of course I don't think that. And
this comes back to what we've so often talked about on this podcast, that the pattern for speech for the Christian is truth and grace. John 1:14, but also Colossians 4, always let your conversation be seasoned with salt. And this idea of speaking the truth but doing it in a gracious way, the reason we bang on about it at CARE is because actually this helps to solve the free speech conundrum, because we're saying we want freedom, but we will exercise it with due restraint. So we won't libel people, and we will not incite violence through our words.
Completely, yeah. So to give another verse, so Ephesians 4:29 says, "Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen." And so I think actually the balance which we want to strike here is we would want to say, well, actually, I don't think someone should be arrested for saying something like this.
Yes.
But I also don't think that they should speak in that language freely anyway.
I completely agree.
And so we would be advising people to speak gently, graciously, lovingly, whilst still holding to truth.
I agree. I do think that maybe something we could do at a future podcast is to debate free speech, and for one of us to play the absolutist position, and one of us to play, or even get someone on the podcast who takes an absolutist position. Maybe this is a shout out. If that is you and you'd like to come and debate us, do get in contact, but no guarantee that we will proceed, because we believe in limits to free speech. I think it's worth maybe finally, to wrap things up, just commenting briefly on the debate that's happening in the House of Lords at the end of this week. So if you're watching this podcast, it may have already happened, but on Friday the 12th of September, it's the first round of second reading in the House of Lords on the Kim Ledbetter assisted suicide bill. And so many peers, more than 200 want to speak, that actually there's going to be a second day of second reading. Don't necessarily expect there to be a vote. By convention in the Lords, you don't always vote at second reading. It can just move straight to committee if no one pushes for a vote. Equally, there might be one. If there is one, it will be on the second day, not the first day. So this Friday really is about listening to members of the House of Lords, the UK's second legislative chamber, speaking about the general principles of the legislation. And I think a couple of things that I've picked up. One is I've been struck by the number of peers who are very committed to amending this bill. I think I would say I want you to go even further. I do want you ultimately to vote it down, whether that's now or whether that's at third reading. We'll see. And the second thing is a Lords committee, the Delegated Powers Committee, released a report saying that there was at least 11 parts of the bill that they felt sidestepped Parliament and gave too much power to ministers. And the difficulty there is that the government is technically neutral on this issue, but also I think it reflects the wider concern that's been present right the way through, which is this legislation has not been adequately scrutinised. And we're talking about a law that will mean people can kill themselves with help from the state. So it's such an issue with such gravity behind it that it is quite distressing to read reports like that suggesting that actually this law is badly drafted in significant ways and has not been adequately scrutinised. So I really hope and am praying that the House of Lords will step up, as I'm sure they will, and give this a rigorous assessment, and ultimately have the courage of their convictions. If they think this is a bad law, even if they agree with the principle of assisted suicide, well, please vote this down.
And it's worth saying, actually, to those who are watching online, please do continue to write into peers as well. At this point, it's probably a bit late to handwrite something, but you can still email peers.
Definitely, yes.
So do set out your concerns. I know that certainly in second and third reading debates for MPs, a lot of them talked about constituents who had written into them. I have read previous speeches from the House of Lords when they have debated this topic. And again, they have often referenced people who have written into them and the strength of feeling which people have got. Some have even mentioned people's own personal stories. So please do write in if you think that is something you could do.
And all the more reason to get hold of our new resource, your guide to engaging with your local representative, because although this is written about engaging with your MP, the principles carry over very nicely to writing to members of the House of Lords. And so just 5 very quick principles. Ask yourself before you write what you're trying to achieve. Always include your address and postcode. It's not as important with peers, but it's good practice. Be polite, keep it succinct, and request a specific action at the end as well. Ask the peer to do something on account of the arguments you're putting forward. And if you want to know what those arguments are against this bill from a kind of secular perspective as well as a Christian perspective, head to the website care.org.uk. We've got so much material on this issue, and you'll find a lot there that will help you write a very effective letter or email.
Yeah, some of which actually is specifically targeted at the Leadbeater bill. So you can find an article which talks about 7 problems with the Leadbeater bill. So that might be a good place to start.
Fantastic. Well, Peter, that wraps up another Engage podcast. Marks out of 10 for how you think this discussion has gone. I've never asked you that before. Certainly not live and on camera.
Oh gosh, I don't feel at liberty to answer that.
They see, again, we believe in restrictions on free speech. I don't feel as much a restriction. I'm going to say a good 8 out of 10 for that one. I really enjoyed that discussion, and I do think there's potential around talking a little bit more about hypocrisy in public life and potential around the free speech stuff to delve into that. And we will visit, no doubt again, the issue of assisted suicide as well. So it's like we began a conversation over a year ago, and now 30 episodes later, we've just carried it on. It's a pleasure to have this conversation.
As always.
Yeah, and Isaac, thank you for your production of this podcast. And newsflash, this is a spoiler. We will soon be getting Isaac a microphone, and if he feels the need to keep us in check, or even to supplement, add to, or correct. Can't wait for that. That will really test our commitment to free speech, won't it? So anyway, you can soon expect to hear Isaac's dulcet tones on our podcast. So we're really excited about that. As ever, if there's anything you'd like us to discuss or even just compliments you'd like to give us, then please do message. Let us know what you found helpful. We'll be back very, very soon. Until then, Peter, sir, goodbye.
Take care.